She's probably
to the side of the street, right?
Yes.
On the side.
I hope she turns the camera.
Routine, can you just kind of, just a quick sound check, just say hi?
She's on the side of the recording.
Hey there.
Perfect, all right, we got you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Time being 7 o'clock, I call to order the Franklin School Committee meeting. Meetings are recorded by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 29, as well as recorded by Franklin Matters. And at the conclusion of this meeting, we will be adjourning to executive session and will not be returning to open meeting. All right, so we will begin with our pledge student, Josh Ferranti. You can come on up to the mic. So Josh is a 5th grade student who began his journey at Kennedy School in kindergarten. In his free time, he loves to read. Quote, "I just love the way books flow and the excitement of finding out what happens next," Josh said. He has 2 step-siblings, Zoe and Chris, and 3 brothers, Luke, Colin, and Christopher. Josh also has a big dog named Morgan. When it comes to food, his favorite is cheese pizza from Central Pizza. However, he's quick to point out that macaroni and cheese is his least favorite. Josh is active in sports, playing both football and baseball, and he's excited to register for basketball this winter. In his free time, he also enjoys playing Roblox with his brother. Josh, thank you very much, and if we could all please stand. Josh, you can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Fantastic job. And as is customary, we'll pause for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to get into a lot of boring stuff right now, so if you want to take off, feel free to.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. All right, review of agenda. Does the agenda look okay to everybody? All right. Payment bills taken care of. Payroll, Vice Chair McNeil.
Payroll's in order.
All right. FHS student reps.
I'm Jack Aldred, the Vice President of the junior class.
And I'm Keaton Cooper, the President of the junior class.
And some news regarding the whole school is the pep rally was a huge success on Friday. Similarly, homecoming dance brought in just over 800 students this year, which is, I think, just under last year, but it's still a super high number. Looking ahead, there's an upcoming curriculum open house on October 1st from 6 to 8 p.m. More information regarding this will be sent out to families. FHS has also partnered with Franklin Food Pantry and started the Weekend Backpack Program, where every Friday, students who might benefit from support will be able to take home food provided by the Franklin Food Pantry. Parents can sign up on the FHS website. And closing on October 1st is the free school ID sign-up.
Now to sports, boys varsity football and the homecoming game beat Brockton High School 35-7, and our very own, the week before, our very own running back Andrew Frollo was named Metro West Player of the Week. Boys varsity soccer beat Attleboro 1-0, and girls varsity soccer tied Attleboro 2-2. Boys cross country lost to Attleboro, and girls cross country beat Attleboro. Our golf team topped Milford, and our field hockey team beat Concord Carlisle, and goalie Devin Berry has yet to let in a goal this season. And finally, Connect for Cancer will be holding a pickleball tournament with a $10 entry fee on October 12th, and all funds will go to the Nick Strong Foundation, and the winner will receive a $100 gift card awarded by our very own student government.
The class of 2025 now has yearbook sales open. Additionally, the yearbook committee has partnered with G&B Photography for senior portraits. Seniors participating will sign up on the form in the FHS newsletter. Similarly, seniors can also submit baby pictures. That closes on October 4th.
And finally, our class of 2026, PSAT will take place on October 26th from 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. and the sign-up fee will be $40. Students can sign up on the Franklin High School website using Unibank. Prom this year will be held in the same location as last year, at the Lakeview Pavilion on May 2nd.
Thank you both very much. Any kind of questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Ruth Ann?
No questions. I wasn't sure if I could highlight the letter that was sent from the Brockton administrator. I mean,
I'm
that
going
would
to
be
be
the best.
sharing that. Ruth Ann,
All right, awesome.
I'll share an update in my superintendent report.
Yeah. Thanks, because I think that's worth mentioning. But great job, guys. Keep up the good work. Good to see all the turnout. And let's go Franklin.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you both very much. Appreciate it. Feel free to take off. All right, and superintendent's
Okay.
report.
I'm having a full circle moment here. This is the age, my son's age is in this realm, and I'm looking around, and Jack and Keaton I've known since he was in 3rd grade. He's much bigger now.
Keaton
Um,
was at my school.
he was?
Kindergarten, yes.
So you're having one of those moments?
I
You
am
didn't
having
even
one of
tell
those
me. I was sitting here alone feeling, and now I feel like
Yeah.
someone's
Yeah.
with me. That's great. And the whole elementary team in here, and there's different people who've interacted. So that's nice. It's nice to see our students go through the system and continue to grow and develop, and then have opportunities like this to be front and center on stage. So with that said, I'll open up with my report. September 17th was our first early release day of the school year. Educators participated in professional learning and worked on various topics connected to the district improvement plan. Elementary educators focused on new curriculum implementation, learning about DIBELS, early literacy assessment tool, and further implementing ST math. At the middle level, departments spent time launching and refining various curriculum resources like Common Lit, Project Lead the Way, Open SciEd, and Open SciEd. High school teachers launched their year by reflecting on aligning department goals with the school improvement plan goals, and also spent time focused on curriculum planning and implementation. Students will have a half day on October 2nd, and educators will continue their professional learning that afternoon. In observance of Rosh Hashanah, schools will respectfully be closed on Thursday, October 3rd, and we wish all of those celebrating a peaceful, meaningful holiday. Finally, you heard a teaser from Ruth Ann around the Brockton High positive feedback we received. I had a fan expectations follow-up letter conversation or comment ready to go to just talk through how I had sent those home, and we appreciate folks for just demonstrating that. I was at the game, Dr. Rogers, many other administrators were at the game, and we just saw that folks were just engaged as fans, and really I felt it was a positive event when I left, but then to receive some positive feedback from someone who goes to another, or particularly our competitor on that day, it was nice to read, and I think it reinforces the idea in Franklin of what we esteem to be. And basically, I received a letter from a Brockton parent who shared a heartwarming story of positivity that highlights the positive impact our students and our community can have on others. As the parent of 2 students involved in the marching band and the cheerleading team, the family has often encountered hostility during football games in surrounding communities due to some negative perceptions of Brockton. The parent went on to talk about that at a recent Franklin football game, they experienced a refreshingly different response. And despite Brockton's defeat, Franklin band and many other fans that were there for the football game stayed and cheered on the Brockton band at the end of the game for their performance, offering words of encouragement and making them feel welcomed and supported. This parent expressed a deep gratitude in their display of kindness, and said that this was the second time she's experienced this when visiting Franklin from our fans and our students and our community. And she talked about, just wanted to reinforce that the continuation of positive interactions and how much they can mean to so many when we do that. And it was just a good reminder, and I'm very proud of our community for really welcoming them. The reason the band went on at the end of the game was because it was homecoming, and we had the homecoming floats during halftime. So the band waited until the end, and that's how we ended up in this situation. But folks stuck around, and it was a nice moment. So I wanted to highlight that for the community, thank folks for following those fan expectations, and thank our students. And then finally, we want to continue to embody that type of behavior. And I will share any updates with the community and communications around different areas that we want to look at, particularly over by the Hill there's a hill with a retaining wall that I put eyes on that I think we need to tighten up a bit. But as far as behavior goes, it was really a good example for us as a community. And I feel like sometimes the bad news gets out on different communities when something bad happens, but we don't always share the positives, and this was one of them. That completes my opening superintendent report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments from the committee?
No questions, just love to hear that story of good sportsmanship and community.
Same. It's really great to hear the community really portraying itself at a very high level. So, thank you.
No questions. Thank you.
No questions, but thank you for sharing that letter from the family in Brockton. It's great to see just the example that we as in the Franklin community can be for our surrounding communities. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
I would like to thank Sarah as well for sharing so much positive news across the district. Thanks again.
And Ruthia?
Yeah, same thing. I know we have a town council member, Pat Sheridan, who's a teacher in Brockton, who caught wind of this and was pretty proud too. So thanks.
Well, it's always fantastic. I think it was last year, kind of won the Dalton Award, like most like competitive best wins, but then also got voted on by the rest of other communities for Franklin's just sportsmanship overall. And but yeah, it's fantastic, and it's really all encompassing too. I love the fan expectation emails that you're sending out, but then the fact that the parents and families are reading them, and kind of just having those conversations with their kids, and then the kids themselves are just absolutely fantastic. And so it's a testament to everybody within this community, but it's fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, so now moving on, guest presentations, 24-25 elementary school improvement plans.
Okay, so before you tonight, as we do every year, we presented the district improvement plan to you last meeting, and now our early childhood program, our pre-K program, and the elementary team of administrators will present their school improvement plans. You may recall when we presented, and please make your way up, folks, if you're. You may recall when we presented, we had the slide that had basically the district goals in a broader sense, and then the school improvement plans get into a little more detail linked to the same goals. We've kept the same format for continuity and understanding, and these will be posted on our website as they are approved. But we're really excited. We have a really great team of administrators who work really hard, and I'm most proud of how much they work together to really look at what's the common good for all of our students within Franklin. Despite working in different buildings, I think they've done a great job of exemplifying that, and I'm excited to present them to you and have them share their goals.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Taylor. I'm the principal at the ECDC.
Hi, Carrie B. Savage, principal at Helen Keller.
Hi, Stephanie Wessick, principal at Jefferson Elementary.
Hi, Sarabi Connolly, principal at Kennedy Elementary.
Good evening. I'm Evan Shellman, principal at Parmenter Elementary.
Brad Henderson, principal at Oak Street.
Okay, so we're going to be going back and forth a little bit. We're going to share the mic in terms of presenting our elementary and our early childhood school improvement plan to you.
So the next couple of slides you'll see are very similar to the slides that Superintendent Gugio used when he did the presentation last week. So we're not going to read them to you, and we'll go through them quickly so that they came right from his presentation, so they're things that you've seen before, the core values and the theory of action. So the first strategic objective that we're going to be speaking about tonight is promoting the social, emotional well-being and belonging of students and staff in the Franklin Public Schools. Sorry about that. That was way back. That was a long time ago. So the goal is to help students develop connections to schools, support positive behaviors, and increase academic achievement. The Franklin Public Schools will enhance programs and practices to enable each student to acquire the knowledge, attitudes, and skills associated with the core competencies for social emotional learning. And the ECDC is approaching this goal from the social emotional development of our youngest learners in the district, our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And we are going to be revisiting the use of a tool called the EDECA, which is an early childhood development assessment that we will be using with students who we feel we may need some more information on in these areas. So their social emotional development, they may have some trauma, they may have some things that have affected their lives that we feel that administering this assessment will give us some more information about them as learners and them as students so that we can plan and prepare interventions for them in whatever ways that we feel are best. The nice thing about this assessment is that it's electronically done. Parents can also give input, so we have the opportunity to compare school data and home data, and the program also lists and suggests different interventions that we could do within the school building with the staff that we have in place. We're also going to be looking at incorporating a program called Choose to Be Nice, which is a program that highlights different characteristics and different values for students every month. And there is an early childhood version of this program, which is a homegrown program out of Needham, Massachusetts. So we're going to be investigating that with the staff and seeing how we could implement it in our school. We hope by the end of the year to have that program either up and going or getting ready to implement in the following year.
And as we think about this objective as we transition to elementary, we are thinking about continuing how we support positive behaviors and academic achievement in our students by enhancing programs and practices. And the work in Initiative 1A really speaks to creating a cycle, a tiered cycle of K-5 SEL, instruction and reflection. So there are 3 key action steps that are tied to this work. I don't want to say it's huge change, but I think it moves our work forward in terms of this goal. Action step 1 really is around how do we track and sort of our system for collecting data related to social emotional learning for our students and the measures that we're using, which sort of falls into number 2, kind of that bullet point. We have used over the past few years DESA, the Devereux Scale of Student Strength, as our primary SEL sort of assessment measure. Last spring, we piloted in grade 5 the Panorama Social Emotional Learning Questionnaire. So the difference being DESA is a teacher kind of lens in terms of observationally and social emotional needs of students. Panorama is student voice and student perspective. So it gives a nice kind of combination and balance over what the teacher is seeing and what the student is bringing forward in terms of thinking about growth mindset, self-efficacy, social awareness, and self-management. So our goal this year as an admin team is to think about what that rollout might look like. Currently we have a fall and spring DESA administration, but we're looking to see where Panorama may fit in upper elementary 3-5. So again, we piloted in 5th, and we will talk more as a team around whether it's 2 administrations this year or if it's more an end of year administration. So that's work that will be ongoing connected to this action step. That falls in line with action step number 3 for 1A. One of our goals, which is tied to the work of our school adjustment counselors, which is key, is really aligning and refining our Tier 1 curriculum for social emotional learning. We talk about curriculum review cycles in math and literacy. It was time for us to sort of pull together our approaches when we think about the schoolhouse and tiered approach and the resources that we use. We have multiple resources for SEL. Second step is going to be our foundational Tier 1 social emotional curriculum, and still pulling from zones, responsive classroom. But this work really being led by our school adjustment counselors to align us as we move forward across our elementary schools so that our instruction is together and supports kind of our goals connected to social emotional learning. With the outcomes being, on the right-hand side, really students applying strategies that they're being taught. How are we measuring growth? And is the support that we're, and the goals that we're setting, is it timely and intervening in a way that is responsive to student needs? So that's 1A.
And then 1B, I'm really not going to say that much, you don't even have to go back. 1B, we didn't really add much to this section. We took feedback from last year to include restorative practices, something that we have been doing, but we did include that in there this year. And that's something we've always been doing with students, especially if it's like an office visit or reframing an interaction between students. But we wanted to name it here, and then we're working with our staff more around what that looks like as well. So, but largely the same for 1B.
Our strategic objective number 2 is around engaging in rigorous curriculum to ensure that students are provided with rigorous learning opportunities that foster the development of their knowledge, skills, and dispositions they will need in their future college, career, and civic endeavors. The Franklin Public Schools will offer an engaging and rigorous curriculum that focuses on preparing students for a rapidly changing, technologically advanced, globally independent future. And this is an area that I really have to start off by saying that the preschool team has done an outstanding job implementing a new curriculum. We began the new curriculum pre-K on my way last year, and the team just rose to the occasion with a brand new curriculum and stayed on pace and thought of great ideas and really, jumped right into this brand new curriculum last year. And I just had to give them a shout out because they really have done an outstanding job with that. And I think most of this goal for us focuses now around differentiating the program for our different programmatic structures that we have in place. So we did some change in scheduling and programs this year at the ECDC where we have our youngest learners who come for 2.5-hour sessions, either morning or afternoon. We have some students, typically developing students, who come for 4 hours a day. And then we have a new programmatic structure this year where our students who are preparing for kindergarten are coming to school 6 hours a day. So when you are looking at the same curriculum across very different programs and developmental levels of students, our focus this year is really on the collaboration within the teams of the programmatic structure and how are we going to take the curriculum and differentiate it for the developmental levels of the students in the different programs. So we've had some really great conversations at our common planning times around the teams of teachers that work with those particular students and how we are going to work together to look at the curriculum and pick the most appropriate activities, modify them, differentiate them for the age level of students and the needs of students around special education learners and English language learners. So that's really where we're focusing this year. The other part of this goal for us is beginning to jump into what the assessment practices look like within the new curriculum. That was an area that we really didn't have an opportunity to jump into next year, but because we have a developmental summary of students throughout the year in preschool, we want to look at the assessment tools in the program, the developmental summaries that are sent home to parents at conference times, the state standards, and then progress reports for our special education students. And we hope that one of our outcomes by the end of the year is that we will have a crosswalk developed, which means that we will have all the different components of the curriculum assessment and the progress reporting that goes on and see where we can find commonalities or where we may be doing things more than once when we don't need to. So differentiation for programmatic structures and assessment are the two focus areas for us in this goal.
At the elementary level for Initiative 2A, last year we primarily focused on reflecting on current practices through the lens of universal design for learning. We emphasize student engagement. This year we're expanding that focus to include executive functioning skills, Our goal is to adapt to recent changes in the UDL guidelines, which emphasize a shift from cultivating expert learners to learner agency. This simply means going beyond providing materials and resources for children and instead using the UDL framework as a way to create a learning environment where it empowers children to take academic risk and take ownership of their learning. Last year, our action steps also focused on math professional development, particularly on differentiating tiered supports and implementing math language routines. This year, we want to take a similar approach to reading instruction, strengthening our resources for tiered instruction, particularly Tier 1 using the new HMH curriculum. We want to achieve this through common learning experiences, strategic scheduling, and professional development opportunities. And our priority continues to be curriculum alignment with the emphasis on HMH as a way to bolster all tiered supports. As a result of all that, our anticipated outcome is that students will show an increased effort and perseverance toward learning goals and objectives, supported by more targeted and effective instruction and intervention support. And then, of course, with the continuation of HMH curriculum, all students will have equitable access to high-quality Tier 1 literacy instruction. All students will also benefit from Tier 2 and Tier 3, which gives us an opportunity to measure their growth more effectively.
All right, moving into action step 2B. And actually, I'm not sure whose idea it was to go ECDC and then elementary, but I'm liking it because I want to piggyback on so much of what Ms. Taylor said. So continuing with HMH this year, the Into Reading New Literacy Curriculum Resource, we're affectionately calling this Year 1. Last year was Year 0. And so this year, we're having our main focus on assessment, similar to what Ms. Taylor mentioned with their curriculum resource as well. So focus on assessment this year. Our literacy specialists will be utilizing CPT and PLC, so Common Planning Time and Professional Learning Community Time, same type of thing at different schools, to go over assessment and to look at data that's been inputted by teachers, and then they'll kind of look at that, and that'll help to inform their instructional practices, form intervention groups, and then be able to adjust, that circle. So reviewing the data and adjusting instructional practices. Also, there is a dyslexia screener that we've been using. We're adjusting that to be K-3 this year as well, and that has a communication piece to families and getting some of those kids on the right track with their literacy learning. And then just wanting to highlight one of the outcomes, just piggybacking on what Dr. Connolly said about UDL and ownership. There's like a UDL 3.0, which one of the main pieces of this change has to do with student agency and really taking ownership in their learning. So that second outcome, students will do the majority of the cognitive work in a lesson, right? We thought that that's an outcome that we should be looking for in this action step.
So now we're on to strategic objective number 3, which is delivering high-quality instruction to meet the academic and SEL, social emotional learning needs of each learner. To ensure that each student is supported and challenged to reach their full potential, the Franklin Public Schools will align curriculum, instructional practices, and varied assessment opportunities to personalize learning and meet individual needs. So the ECDC is, part of this goal relates to the strategic objective number 2 around the curriculum and the differentiation, but we also plan to, as the elementary team spoke of, do some more investigating into the UDL practices and how that can apply at the preschool level in order to develop a common understanding amongst the staff and what that looks like in classrooms regardless of the programmatic structure of the day. We also, this goal, and I think you'll hear the same thing from my colleagues, is all about learning the new IEP and working together and receiving professional development around how those new documents are going to look now that we are using the new IEP. We are going to, at the ECDC, have a educator from another district come in and really talk to us and focus around how their district worked with the student voice portion of the new IEP for preschoolers, which will be a really interesting presentation to hear how they, garnered information for this new IEP from 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, some who have, language and communication challenges. So we're looking forward to that PD opportunity this year in November. And I think, yep, that's it.
So quickly, if you'll indulge me, I just want to say Superintendent Jaguar was having that same moment as the parent of high schoolers when Jack Aldred sat there. He came through Davis Thayer along with his twin Cole and his older sister Ella, and all I could picture was them as their elementary self. So I'm glad you said that. I was having that same moment of just how great it is to see kids kind of go through those levels. So also kind of building on what Mrs. Taylor had said, at the elementary level for 3A, we're looking at implementing UDL principles using Novak Education Look-Fors as a guide. That looks like objectives that are posted and referred to throughout lessons, amplifying students' identities, and embracing their SEL needs, as well as flexible methods. And also continuing to design master schedules that maximize the impact of service providers, interventionists, curriculum specialists in building the academic schedule, and also providing professional development opportunities for all stakeholders, including special education, implementation of the new IEP, and continued practice with forms and processes, as well as reflecting and refining our data collection strategies in order to inform goal writing and progress monitoring. And as a result, students will have equitable access to instruction as well as personalized support as needed. They'll be supported through that intentional scheduling, and also receive specialized instruction support in order to access grade level content and demonstrate growth towards their individual goals.
And we are at our final strategic objective number 4, which is effective two-way communication to support student learning. Enhance opportunities for two-way communication between and among all students, families, staff, administrators, and the community. So at the ECDC, we have 2 parts of this goal. The first being focused around the increasing enrollment. At the ECDC, we ended last year's school year with 196 students. We are growing, and students are coming daily into our school population, which is wonderful, but that also, conversely speaks to the space constraints that we have. I'm sure that you already know we're in a part of the middle school right now that was expanded into that space a couple of years ago, and our class sizes continue to rise and the needs of students are continuing to increase. Early intervention referrals are high, and students who are qualifying for special education services continue to rise. So that's an area that we've been in constant communication with Mrs. Morano and the superintendent around what is the future of the ECDC population look like, location look like, how are we best going to be able to meet the needs of the students that are coming. The other levels are decreasing, but the ECDC continues to increase daily. So that's an ongoing conversation. And then the second part of this strategic objective for the ECDC is really around communication amongst all stakeholders in the ECDC and Franklin community. And through my entry process that I did last year from February until June, one of the top 3 areas that came out of the interviews I did with staff and with parents and with administrators was that the communication needed some work at the ECDC, and the connections that we needed to make needed to be either rejuvenated or new things started. So I'm really happy to say that within the next week we will be meeting with representatives from Horace Mann and Franklin High around re-energizing the Best Buddies program. So we'll have some communication with across levels in regards to student involvement for our students and their students, so that's great. We'll also have made a connection with a teacher at the high school who runs the early childhood class and program preparation with students over there. So we have begun to form that relationship with the high school as well. We are continuing internships with Dean College. So we have some students coming in who are student teaching this year. We have a senior ambassador program with Franklin Senior Center, where they have some seniors who come and volunteer in the building. We haven't gotten that up and going yet this year, but the connections to the community have really been an important part in the communication around who the ECDC is and how we are part of the whole community here and how we can connect to people to make that known is really the second part of this goal for us.
So, at the risk of being overly efficient, you'll just notice that the elementary actions and outcomes here have to do with the reorganization, right, and supporting the reorg in the best ways that we can. And then also strengthening school-based community connections. You've heard about the new website. We're getting lots and lots of, soliciting lots and lots of, download the new great app, please do. We would do a drawing tonight if we felt like we could. So just continuing to download that app because that'll be something that people can really rely on to get information from whatever schools they choose from, and Franklin Public Schools as an overarching umbrella as well.
I think there's 2 more marketing emails coming. Just put it out there. I think the 30th is the final one.
Just download the app, everyone. Yeah, so thank you very much, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you all very much. This is fantastic. Actually, start online. Ms. O'Sullivan.
I don't have any real questions. I thought that was a great presentation, very thorough. If I think of anything on Come Back Around, I just, there's a lot to digest, and it sounds like you guys have a lot covered, so appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a great presentation, and I met a couple of parents of ECDC. Had great stories about ECDC. In fact, I met last weekend, and the presentation you gave, fantastic, and the hard work we can see literally behind each and everything. It's a great thing. Thank you very much, each of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation, but more importantly, all the work that you're doing. This is a lot. So an incredible amount of work, incredible the thought that goes into this, and we really appreciate it because it's this thoughtfulness that really makes Franklin a special place to go to school. Just kind of one question on my end. There's a lot going in here in terms of universal designs for learning, multi-tiered systems of support. So maybe, and you mentioned some of this like all throughout. So maybe just kind of like what like 1 or 2 big takeaways in terms of what's new this year that we're doing that's a build off from what we've done in the previous years. Like, could you just maybe just draw a through line in terms of what we're implementing this year that's kind of building off the previous years?
In terms of UDL at the elementary level, taking a look at some of the updates, we did some new learning this past summer with Katie Novak from Universal Design for Learning Education. We did some learning around how we can be more trauma informed with how we prepare information for students to access. Like we said, we learned a little bit more about student agency and having students really drive the learning and take ownership of it. So that's some new learning around like the UDL. It's something that we're really trying to focus on over the course of several years. It's like, this is how we do business, as opposed to this is the new latest and greatest. So really sticking with it. And we also mentioned kind of the look-fors. So what it might look like, sound like, as we walk in and out of classrooms, daily. That is also adjusted with kind of the new UDL 3.0. So just making sure that we're staying informed of updates and we're communicating that to our staff and families in an informed, methodical way. And then in terms of, like we said, the literacy curriculum resource that we have year one now, right, with a shift towards, we went through all the different modules last year. We had support for that. We got our staff together, our grade levels together, talking about it, making connections to, not connections, but trying to bring about our special education staff as well, and like how do we use this new resource. This year, there's a focus on assessment. So we're having staff really focus on keeping track of the data, how kids are doing, and are there any adjustments that we want to make? Do the assessments really, are they telling us what we're looking for? How do we adjust to them? And then being able to have those conversations in our common planning times. So that's kind of how we've taken like last year's goals and really built on them. So that outcome piece, right? We spent some time this summer taking a look at where did we get with a lot of this, and so now what are we ready for next that's manageable? What's the next bite? And then how will we know that we've achieved that as a district as well? It's also one of the benefits of doing like a common elementary school improvement plan as opposed to each having our own as well. It helps to keep everybody on the same page.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you for that clarification. It's great to hear like these initiatives that we've been doing with UDL and MTSS in the past, but also to keep hearing these updates and see the visioning for where we intend to go with them, and always having that iterative process for improving just the entire educational experience here at Franklin. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. So to echo my colleagues, I can't speak. Great presentation. Thank you. It was very informative. One thing that jumped out at me though was around EDECA. And I thought we did work on that last year. So can you just elaborate like what the difference was from last year to what we're doing this year?
I would say that it was on hold last year, more than it probably could have been. And there has been a progression over the years of how it's been used. When we started using it years ago, it was for all students. And it was becoming more apparent as students' needs were changing that we needed to focus that, using that as a separate data point for students. So not necessarily all students, but students who we needed more information on. And last year they were kind of on hold with the transition kind of a year that the building had last year. And now, after doing some research and talking to the teachers and finding out what was the most helpful way to use that, because we don't want to give kids an assessment just to give them an assessment if we're not going to use the data in a productive way. It really was determined that it was best to use it on students that we felt were at risk socially and emotionally, so that we could have some ideas on how to develop strategies and interventions with the staff that we have. So it's kind of like getting it back on track in a way that's more beneficial for outcomes for students as opposed to just administering an assessment.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. And then the information that's captured in EDECA, is that going to also roll up into Panorama? So as they transition to kindergarten, that information passes along with them?
It transitions with the student, not in the system. So ECDC isn't part of the Panorama Success Platform, just because of they're little, and the curriculum assessments aren't there and whatnot. So, but it will, if a student was screened with EDECA and there were recommendations, that will travel to the elementary level with the student in their file. So.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I don't really have a whole lot of questions, but I took a couple of notes that I think are really important to point out. One of them that stood out to me probably the most was the elementary goal 2, looking at the executive learning and really kind of the bigger picture, putting a lot of that ownership back on the students and having them actually have to think and take risks. I highlight this because this was something that was a big challenge for me when I was teaching at the collegiate level, trying to get freshmen and sophomores to not just look at a memorization and just say, great, I can do it over and over, but to actually think through it. So seeing that we're implementing this in like K to 5 really is setting our students up for success. It makes for much better, better members of the academic community, and really just, I think it's fantastic. I was really excited to see that as one of our big goals here, so thank you. And then also just commenting on just the complexity around ECDC having an overarching curriculum for the sheer number of variables that you deal with day in and day out, the breadth of students that you have. I think that says a lot, that we're really focusing on everyone getting that same kind of experience and making sure to tailor it to exactly what those needs are. So I think that really can't be understated, just how difficult. I can imagine doing it for like 2 classes where everyone's about, kind of looking at the same picture, and doing it for that kind of diversity is really, really admirable. So thank you. And then kind of the other big thing that I picked up on a lot, and actually was breezed over kind of quickly in section 4, but that community connection, I think that's been something I've seen a lot of it recently. I've seen, I know we've had a few plugs. I've got, I don't know how many text messages or emails about the Franklin app. But I think it really does go a long way, especially as we're in this period of time where we have a lot of things changing. We have a lot of transitions going on. I really appreciate that. I'm glad that we're calling it out specifically, and I really look forward to seeing how we're able to continue that on kind of in a proactive manner over the next few months as a lot of these changes start becoming a little bit more concrete and consistent. So I look forward to seeing how it all shakes out, but I really appreciate the presentations and the thought that went into this.
No questions from me, but thank you guys so much for all of the work on this, and I really appreciate, that all of this is happening in such a cohesive way across all of the elementary schools, especially as we're looking toward, the redistricting next year, and, really the ease that brings into that process. So thank you very much.
I want to thank you all, the entire team. And oftentimes it's some of my other colleagues that might have kind of stolen some of the words I was going to use actually this time. Mr. Chelman, you're the culprit. Some of the stuff that you kind of talked about, both one, when you said whoever's idea it was to kind of pull this together and with the ECDC and the elementary school is just absolutely fantastic. The collaboration, that we see.
I don't think it was my idea. I'm not that guy. I am not that guy. It was. No,
but I love that overall idea because, there is so much, as you mentioned, that, when we have like the students that you're working with day in and day out, they're just going to be funneled right to the elementary schools that we kind of have. And to be able to know and to identify the students that we have and the needs that each of those students have as they're coming into kindergarten versus, if they're not coming into the ECDC, I'm imagining oftentimes they're coming in blind, to the elementary levels. And so the work that you're doing and how you're collaborating with this rest of the team is absolutely fantastic. You also mentioned, you talked about, the idea of the common school improvement plan versus I think when I was kind of first coming on, it was more individualized and still pulled together. And again, and that's, testament, to you, to everybody, within this district, because when we are able to align ourselves like that, it's fantastic and it just provides more equity for all of our students all across the district. So commend all of you for all the work that you're doing. You're fantastic. One question I had, this can kind of go to anybody, but spoke about the dyslexia screener. And now that's a state mandate, is that correct?
Correct.
And, just for those, who are kind of tuning in now, oftentimes, something like this is, I think this is last year, was 2023 was the first year that dyslexia screening was mandated by the state. And just out of curiosity, if anybody might know, how much money did we receive from the state to execute that mandate?
$0.
$0. Okay. So just for those who are, school finance and just finances in general, is also one of those common themes that runs across every single thing that the schools do and how they operate. And so when we have something like an unfunded mandate that comes from the state, where they're explicitly saying that the schools have to do, in this case, a dyslexia screener. And it's a great thing, and I'm glad that it's being done and how it's being done, but it's a burden to the overall budget. And with $0 coming in, and this is not something that the school has the capability to then just kind of tax. You know, it's not a service fee that can kind of be added. That can happen outside the schools. This is just something that kind of comes in, hits the budget, and that now we kind of have to manage and to do the best that we can. And the best that we can is fantastic, what you all are doing. But it just, these unfunded mandates continue to add this extra stressor to the overall budget. And as anybody who's tuned in for just maybe 20 minutes over the past couple of years knows how stressed the Franklin Public School budget already is. Again, it's incredibly commendable, all that you do. I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing for our kiddos. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I'm not going to, I share so many of these comments, and I'll just add something new. It's just when I think back in context to this team and what they've been able to pull off after a very tumultuous spring into the summer, which included layoffs at each level, including elementary, and to see us navigate the budget information as it continued to evolve through the summer, and then ultimately spend the majority. We have an update today. We hired 60 folks over the summer. So that's just, even if one person met for 1 hour for one interview, that's 60 hours. But that's not how it goes. You have rounds, which means multiple people. But they did all that to make sure that they delivered, and they built schedules for kids with limited information to not knowing, and they put together and met to make sure that we were set up so that they could sit here today. I haven't heard a complaint. I haven't heard anything. I have not heard an excuse about anything not getting done. What I'm seeing is goals about what they are doing and what they hope to accomplish by the end of the year. And I think it's a testament to them as professionals and as a team to just say that we are very fortunate in Franklin to have these folks leading at our pre-K and our elementary level. And I can't understate that. It's not lost on me, and I don't think it's lost on anyone who works in education, for sure, the work that you all do. And I know how late you work. I see the emails that come through and the work that happens, so we're lucky that you're leading our teams for our youngest learners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on that note, with you all working so late, it would be, I think, wonderful if you don't have to work that much later tonight. If the rest of the committee is agreeable, I can kind of entertain a motion where we can just kind of amend the agenda and bring the school improvement plan to a vote.
Correct. If you just would take a vote to amend the agenda to have discussion items A and B, which are the elementary school improvement plan and the ECDC improvement plan approvals, take place next in the agenda. So it's a motion to move the school improvement plan approvals up in the agenda to now, basically.
Is there a motion?
Motion to amend the agenda to vote on discussion action items A and B.
All right, second. Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right, we'll just do roll call. Gallagher?
Yes.
Griffith?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Callahan, yes. Sampali?
Yes.
O'Sullivan?
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. So now we'll go on to discussion action item A.
I recommend the approval of the 24-25 elementary school improvement plans as presented.
All right, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the 24-25 elementary school improvement plans as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussions, questions? All right. Again, roll call. Gallagher?
Yes.
Griffith?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Sampali?
Yes.
O'Sullivan?
Yes.
And Callahan, yes. Motion passes.
I recommend approval of the 24-25 ECDC school improvement plan as presented.
Is there a motion as discussed?
Motion to approve the 24-25 ECDC school improvement plan as presented.
Second?
Second.
Questions, comments? Roll call, Gallagher,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Bonaparte,
Yes.
O'Sullivan,
Yes.
and Callahan, yes. All right, both pass.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. All right, so now, getting back to the swing of things, we have district reorganization timeline and storyboard/elementary boundary line recommendations.
Okay, just dual authentication. Good evening, everyone. So we'll just start to just bring you up to speed on the next stage of our plan through the reorganization and implementation. So as you know, the purpose of tonight as we move forward is to really look at implementing the public school facilities, the Franklin Public School Facilities Master Plan. And when I harken back to that plan, it involved really 3 areas. It involved creating equitable learning environments, right-sizing the district, and then also looking at a phased approach to improvements and recommendations through that plan. And the task at hand, not for a vote tonight, but just a presentation tonight, is to establish the elementary school attendance area on a single boundary line that would determine the assignment of students to schools either in the north or the south of our town. So as we move forward, I just wanted to take a moment before we get into the thoughts, comments, and data. We did share a story map, and our intention with sharing a story map was to try to provide a venue where folks could get as much information as possible, look at the information on a map, and use a tool that would allow that to happen. So we'll do some thank yous on who helped develop that, but Colin Boisvert played a tremendous role in helping getting that data up to speed so that we had as much information as we could share regarding this. So I want to thank you, and I know you'll be speaking later. So, but just to acknowledge change for our community, I've reflected a lot about this. I've spent a lot of time in the technical aspect of this, but I wanted to just take a moment and mark a moment for us all and just say that I want to acknowledge that what we are going through as a community, and like other communities that have gone through this, is a significant undertaking when you start looking at school redistricting, school closures, all of those things. And I understand that that change is difficult for folks. It can be difficult for folks, families, staff, students, and it's natural to have concerns about the shifts and how it will impact all of our lives. And as an individual, you think about change and how it impacts you. I think that's human nature, and it's completely understandable. On the technical side, the boundary adjustment is designed to right-fit the district. You've heard me say that. That was one of our goals. It's to create equitable learning environments that meet our programmatic needs for students and look at our enrollment needs not only for today, but also as we move forward in the future. This includes balancing our class sizes and optimizing our facilities to provide the best education. However, I also recognize that with a technical change, there's also adaptive changes that it presents. So change isn't just about logistics and changing. So, if we look at walls and schools in the sense of a physical space, when you start to look at it, it's beyond that. It's actually about community. And I think what we're talking about, and I just wanted to put a shout out to folks that, everyone is coming from a school community. I'm confident that we can build communities based on a new organization, but I wanted to just address that and say that up front because it's important that I say that. And I think, I'm confident in our ability. You just saw a tremendous group of leaders that lead their buildings in a really, really phenomenal way that I think translates to they could lead in any situation, in any dynamic. But I know that creates a new situation and change. So, the recommendations we put before you come with careful consideration, and they really try to aim at looking at the long-term success of our district. And the decisions made for the greater good of the community, really to ensure that we remain as strong as we can be and really be as responsive as possible to the evolving needs of our kids and put the right resources in the right spaces. And that's really what this came down. And I really believe that together, as we move forward, I think we can find the best path forward. And this is one stage. There are many stages that we'll be prepared to interact with the community with and share information on, but a boundary line establishes what that community ends up becoming at the K, at the elementary level. So you can move to the next slide. So just to talk through a little bit of background, this was in a previous presentation we've done. I think it's been in a few in the spring. It really hits on some of the background information and folks are just tuning in. And it has to do with our current attendance areas have been in place basically since 2003. We did have the closure of Davis Thayer, which resulted in students moving to Keller. The enrollment decline, if you look at in that time from 2004 to 24, we've seen enrollments decline over time. And ultimately we've run into other issues and challenges that we've faced with extracurriculars is one example. We talked about the budget for middle school, but there was also some logistical issues around clubs and buses and picking up. We experienced some school size imbalances. So I pulled this from the presentation from the spring, but just to kind of bring us back to some of the things that were at play to help us describe the why. And we've seen with tight staffing margins that we faced through our budget, some real fluctuation across grade sizes and levels, and really trying to balance that has been a bit of a challenge for us. And ultimately our goal was to try to prepare as many equitable resources across the district as possible. So we'll share some further information with you tonight that hopefully paints that picture and it explains further on the rationale for where we landed. So I'll take this slide. These were the 3 strategic recommendations that were part of the short-term approved recommendations. I didn't want to create the master plan, but this was the key that has to do with tonight's focus, which is on that boundary line, and it has to do with the unifying of 3 middle schools under 1 middle school location, the unifying of the 5 elementary schools into the 4 locations, 2 complexes, and then preparing ECDC for expansion to Pond Street, as you heard our principal discuss a bit, in addition to exploring other opportunities for revenue generating through including childcare and options to utilize space that help us try to help generate revenue on different fronts that we talked about with childcare. So establishing a boundary line, the initial task is to really set the attendance area, which will be a charge that we are recommending, but it's ultimately school committee approval. Ultimately, the superintendent makes the recommendation, proposes the area. The school committee votes on an attendance area, and then K-5 assignments in K-8, but it's really, if you think about it, middle school is the whole town, so this boundary line impacts K-5 for that time frame. And that helps us establish the school communities. And then from there, the principals who will be leading those communities will begin to also engage in communicating so that we can create engagement opportunities for the schools, and when people know what school they're a part of, we can continue to work through the variety of things that we'll experience through the year. And then continue our processing. But ultimately, a decision like that helps us move forward on identifying the staff assignments as we develop our budgets and look at allocation of resources across schools. It helps us with our schedule. It helps us with our PCCs, which we will be meeting with in October, to help us establish who are the members of the PCC that will serve within the communities in which they live. And then transportation. We've begun a lot of work on transportation, but ultimately determining a line is the way to move that work forward and finalize. And you can expect a similar presentation to this on many of these ideas, these items, but for transportation in particular. So ultimately, the policy's there on where this comes from and what the charge is. And this is basically the process that we're in right now.
So looking at some of the guiding principles for creating the boundary line, one of the big guiding principles was balanced enrollment, the distribution of students. This was actually a recommendation from the subcommittee to have a balanced enrollment between the 2 elementary schools. Adequate instructional spaces within functional capacity. The north Elementary School has a functional capacity of 1,252 students, and the South has a functional capacity of 1,151 students. Looking at the natural boundaries also helps shape this boundary line, so taking into account some of the natural boundaries like 495, some conservation land, some of the state forests, and commercial zones in the town. Also adequate dedicated spaces for in-district specialized programs. Also looking at sustainability and considering for future population shifts. This has to do with houses that turn over and a potential new development in either zone. We also took into account the geographic proximity to school, so the distance that families were traveling from their residence to their school. There's consideration for Davis Thayer fifth graders and transportation considerations as well, including traffic and traffic flow throughout the town. So the proposed elementary school boundary line, which was presented in the story map, starts on the west side at 495, goes down 140 to Beaver Street and to Pleasant Street. It's important to note that students who reside on Beaver Street or Pleasant Street are assigned to the north, so it doesn't matter what side of the street you're on. If you have an address at Beaver Street or Pleasant Street, in this recommendation, you are assigned to the north of the school. This slide shows the proposed recommended boundary line on top of the current school zones.
It's important to note here, you can see some of the dividers. Keller's divided amongst Oak Street, which breaks up both sections of Keller. So you, in essence, travel through Oak as you get to Keller Curve.
So looking at how we analyze the map of Franklin, when you look at the map of Franklin, you can see that the town is longer from north to south as opposed to east to west. There's many ways you could put a line into this map. When you put the schools on the map, it makes a north to south vertical line a little more challenging with the proximity that families would travel from going north to south or south to north. When you look at population that's put in, it becomes a little bit more clear that this line is going to be an east to west or some sort of curved line. Each of these orange point is a enrolled elementary student for 25-26. This does not account for any middle or high school. You can also see on this map too the empty spaces in the geography. You can see there's a big empty part for the state forest. You can see some of the commercial spaces. You can really see where people actually live in Franklin. It becomes even more noticeable when you look at a heat map. So the darker shades of purple, red, yellow are really densely populated areas in Franklin. So you can see typically on the northern side of town, there's a lot more darker purple and blue. That indicates that there's a denser population in that part of town. As opposed to looking at the south, there's a lot more shallow colors and no colors in areas, and that reflects a less densely populated area. I also want to highlight on this slide too, in the center of town, that there is a really dense part in the center of Franklin as well. And that has kind of helped curve our line to where we're recommending based on what this would put for enrollment. So we did explore some other boundary line considerations with this. Area 1, this line shows 495 to 140 straight through the town. This line looks very nice geographically, but when you apply the population, the blue dots reflect students that are in the recommended boundary line assigned to south, but if they were moved north, it would shift the population from north to south to almost 1,300 at north and 640 at south. This exceeds the functional capacity at north, which makes this a non-viable option for us. So shifting the line a little bit more north, if we went 495 to 140 to Chestnut Street and to Mill Street, this is really similar to where the line was at Davis Thayer at Mill Street. So looking at this zone, shifting it up a little bit, same idea here. The blue section here is assigned south in our recommendation, but if moved north, still creates an imbalance from north and south enrollment. So moving it even a little bit more north, this is really similar to the line that we are recommending, but this absorbs a little bit more of the center of town. So if we went 495 to 140, to Main Street, to Dean Avenue, and then to Pleasant Street, again, very similar. Just looking at a couple streets that, in a couple neighborhoods that this would absorb, still creates an imbalance in enrollment. So it's even just moving it a little bit, because of the densely populated area there, creates an imbalance. So that has led us to our recommended line that we are presenting here today. So now looking at the student demographics of the projected North and South Elementary School versus our current. It's important to note here for the highest individual school and the lowest individual school for the 24-25 school year. The highest and lowest is, it's not the same school. You're looking at the highest in the district. So when you're looking at the category, it's one school for the highest in enrollment versus the lowest enrolled school. It's the highest free and reduced percentage, which may be different than the highest enrolled, but it's the highest per category in the district. This is kind of showing how we are narrowing the gap in the demographics when we are utilizing this recommended boundary line. So looking at enrollment, we have schools that show our highest enrolled school and lowest enrolled school. There's a difference between 249 students. We're cutting that to 123 as a difference between north and south. For free and reduced percentage, our highest and lowest creates a difference of 22%. We're cutting that to 11%. And then for students with IEP and English language learners, we are also cutting those percentages pretty significantly as well. This will result in a more equitable experience for all students in the district when you look at student experience.
These are that's the highest elementary school in the high. Just to be clear, these are all elementary data sets.
Now looking at student population for the recommended boundary line, you'll notice that class sizes are balanced across the elementary schools. This will also give more flexibility to absorb enrollment shifts. So if we suddenly see an influx of maybe 7 new students even for a 3rd grade class, in any of our current elementary schools, that could pose a problem for class size and balancing it. But in this model, absorbing 7 students into either complex would give us more flexibility and would not impact class size as much. This is also a potentially positive thing for teacher collaboration. With more teachers working in the same building closely together, there's more opportunity for collaboration and for teachers to lean on each other for additional support. So the residency also supports boundary lines based on the number of livable units at this time in the north and the south zone. So looking at this map, you can see again the more densely populated north area versus the south. This map really shows, again, the gaps in residency. There's over 5,300 livable units in the north and just under 5,800 in the south. So this supports our capacity as well.
48.
Yeah. For transportation, current bus routes structure serves as a foundation for the new boundary line. Routes to two schools will be designed to minimize ride time and maximize efficiency. Overlapping routes will be streamlined to reduce traffic flow and congestion. As an example, there's currently 4 bus routes right now going to different schools that all intersect at the Franklin Common, which is a high traffic area. And 2 of those routes actually go down Pleasant Street right now, and one goes to Oak Street, one goes to Keller. With this new streamlined route system, we can improve traffic flows in those areas, and this gives us an excellent opportunity to do so. The bus stops will be strategically placed and clearly communicated with riders and families, and more information on transportation will follow once the boundary line is finalized and riders are confirmed.
Other considerations per the master plan recommendation that was approved was to look at consideration for the Davis Thayer fifth graders. There were 25 currently, fifth grade students who are currently attending Keller who moved from Davis Thayer. That is the last remaining class from the closure. And based on the consideration, after careful thought, was to look at the one-time exception offered to those 25 fifth grade students. So the choice comes to attend the North 3 to 5, and with that, if an attendance area is set and you live outside of the attendance line, this is considered an exception because of the work that we've done prior to this. It would mean that they're responsible for their own transportation to get there, because we wouldn't drive a bus into a different sector to do that. That's common practice now, and it's in line with the policy. If a student did attend and chose to go to school where they reside, bus transportation would be provided to the students. And this applies, from our recommendation, this would apply to the fifth grade students who experienced the change. It was really a student-centric decision. I've spoken to a few parents along the way, but I've tried to explain this is really about the students who experience the change, recognizing that families experience change as well, but all other siblings would be expected to attend school in the school that they are attending and residing in the area. And the district will communicate with the 25 families directly and talk to them about this particular option, should you approve a recommendation, so that we can work with them directly and determine that. I would say to all families, elementary and middle, there'll be new and familiar faces at each of the schools. And the third through fifth graders will be housed in new locations, whether you went to any school, because if you think about it, the middle school moving to one school at Horace Mann means that the third through fifth grade at the Washington Street complex would be in the Remington Middle School currently, and the Amy Sullivan Middle School on Lincoln Street. So there's just a thought around just housed in the physical location is different. The other thing is there's a new mix of classmates, teachers, staff, administrators, scheduled location. I think that's consistent for all students. So I want to say that because I think there's maybe some confusion about some things being the same, and I would hate to not have kind of just described that a bit, because as we enter the fall, I don't want any confusion about things staying exactly the same should someone like choose to stay at Keller for that example. This was done with consideration. The one other piece I'll mention is just a caution around any line that's voted on establishing is really just we're trying to look at the considerations of the past and what was done, but also try to create a system where we can move forward as a district. Kids continue to grow and move through grades and evolve, but the system and the practices and the boundary line remain the same. And it's like thinking about today, but also thinking about tomorrow. So that was the intention of this particular recommendation and consideration as we put it together. And maintaining balanced enrollment for the future. So one recommendation is to consider policy language to address the increased enrollment shifts over time. So this would not impact any student or family currently enrolled in the Franklin Public Schools. But one way to maintain balanced enrollment as you continue to move forward is to look at when new registrations of families who have no children in the Franklin Public Schools that are living close to the line, is to look at the move-ins and try to determine what makes the most sense for class sizes at each of the elementary schools, and how can we look to monitor that on a regular basis. And if we start to get out of, really get into an imbalanced situation, look at new registrations at the time of assignment, and look to, this is once again, no current family, no one who's experienced that move, but ultimately a new family to Franklin who has not had any children in the system, look to assign them. And if we are the ones assigning, we're responsible for transportation. As I said earlier, I gave you the inverse. And there's no predetermined buffer zone. Some communities have done that. We did not recommend that we needed to do a buffer zone, but ultimately monitor enrollment. We have one attendance line, so it's a little different than some of the communities, but if you Google that, you'll find many districts who do a buffer zone type idea. This was really meant around the attendance line, looking at new people who move don't have any children in the system, so that we can try to keep track of it. The alternative is if you start to see enrollment shifts and it starts to get, you just redistrict again and you create a new line. But that would impact your family, so the thought was to do it as people move in, before they've set up routes that we don't have to continue to do this. I certainly don't want to be involved in this anymore than I have to be. I recognize the transition and what's involved, and a lot of work goes into this, but we're trying to make decisions today that set us up definitively as we move forward and the systems in place, recognizing those changes impact everybody individually on a different level. I want to say that again.
Sure. So attendance area, this is the next steps coming, or what has already happened. So in June, we had a subcommittee presentation. The recommendation came out for a balanced enrollment model, was important out of that meeting. We started populating student data in September when we had the newest student information available for us, most up to date. The story map was built on September 13th and shared on September 18th. Tonight we are presenting to the school committee the boundary line recommendation. Coming up next week, we are planning an open house feedback session. And where's the location for that?
TBD, but I believe we're at the high school?
I'm hoping to book it.
Okay, we tried to book it today, so we'll put a direct email out about that, inviting families, but I think it will be. And it's also not just a feedback session, but all of our principals who will be leading buildings in the new model will also be there, available to meet folks, so that they can get a sense of the folks that will be leading in each of those particular areas as well. And we hope that school committee members can attend as well, just to be there to hear from them.
A target date for a school committee vote is October 8th. Once that, if the boundary line passes, the update into student, our student database Aspen for next school will be populated, and that will give us the ability on October 18th to have principals reach out to their new communities directly. So this is also next steps coming for reorganization. In October, moving plans will be initiated. We have our first meeting on October 1st with the moving company to start getting those plans together. During October, the traffic study will be completed, and there'll be updates available and recommendations from them. Looking into November, staffing assignments will begin, and that'll come on a basis of by role. School-based communications will then begin in November as well. The district will be more focused on operations, the move and capital projects. Capital plan will be finalized in November as well. Looking into December, bus routes will begin development. Level-based schedules will begin development, and budget subcommittee will begin. In January, level-based schedules will be continued to be planned. We'll begin engaging the future school staff members at each school. So we're going to have a couple half days where the new staff members at the new schools will be able to meet as a team on some of those half days. Also in January will be the budget presentation. Looking into February, the school calendar will be finalized for the 25-26 school year. The moving plans will be finalized by then, and there'll be a budget vote. And then looking into March, we'll be continuing engaging future school staff members as well in different capacities. I just wanted to give a special thanks to the GIS department, Kate Hinckley and Natalie Regan-Lampert. They did such amazing work to get the story map put together. Their program ran it, they built it with the information we provided, as well as a number of the maps that were in this presentation as well. They were so easy to work with, and I appreciate how they've been able to work with us and get this all done.
All right. Terrific. Thank you both so much. Open the floor to the committee. What I think I might do at this moment is we'll just kind of start down the line. One question, jump to the next one, and then we'll move back again.
All right, mine has several components. A, B, C, and
It's a
D.
little loophole, right? Yeah. One question, but.
So I know that you said that a lot more was to come on transportation, but can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the guiding principles here? What is the team that's looking into traffic? What have they started to work on, and how is that going to continue through the fall? One question that I'm hearing a lot is, are there going to be staggered start times at the elementary level? Any kind of guiding information that you can give there? And then part C, are there any guiding limitations as you're looking at transportation through these two districted areas of like guiding limits for how long a student can ride the bus? When you think about how many buses do you need, what kind of routes? I know you might not have answers to all of that right now, but wondering if you can kind of give us an overview of what work is being done in that area.
Sure. You're asking the right questions. So our transportation, just the start, when the vote occurred in the spring, we had each of the principals start to do bus counts. That included the number of employees that drive and park in our parking lots, the number of vans that arrive for specialized services, and then looking at the big yellow buses and how many are arriving, when they're arriving, and student count. So we started to gather all that information. Over the summer, through the KDA, I don't think it's a traffic division, but their architect that deals with traffic and how things are designed for traffic flow, visited once in the spring and then came back in the fall to visit, particularly started at our at Keller and Annie Sullivan, but ultimately that was one piece. So we gave that data to them. They visited twice. In addition, we've looped in the DPW and our town engineer to become part of the process. We've also worked with our SROs. We're inviting them to join us as well to that meeting, so that the right people are in the room to look at the recommendations on how we work it. As far as bus rides, I would put, you see the map here. I always say this I used to say this to my daughter. She's older now, but when she was younger, I always would say, like, if I had to pick her up and she was at school or something, or I would say, just remember, you're in your town. You're never that far away from like where what you know. And I just would say, in perspective of the town of Franklin, I would look at the map, and I think what we'll do is probably something similar to another story map that shows kind of more detail on transportation once the line's set. But ultimately, our goal is to transport, whether you're over 2 miles or under 2 miles, to provide busing and transportation that looks to drive out to specific neighborhoods, pick up, and then drive in. It's not a step into there. So that helps us with our bus ride time. The travel distance in perspective is not as far as if you look at the map and you think about a middle school ride or whatnot to go to Horace Mann or high school where we're picking up from around. So I just would add these as layers to that perspective. I don't have bus time numbers now, but that's something that we would look to provide as we continue. I think it's really predicated on who are the riders, where do they live, and we've already done some analysis of who's outside of 2 miles, who may choose to ride a bus, who may not. These are all factors that are get clearer as we know who's attending each school and where they're being picked up from. So that was one piece. You asked like a third part.
Sorry about that. That was part B.
Okay.
Yeah, got lost
Sorry.
in the middle. Will there be staggered start times for K to 2, 3 to 5?
We are charging the elementary school to look at starting at the same time. But ultimately, I don't want to commit tonight on any, because I think they're doing the work right now. But ideally, we'd like to see students enter, especially if we're thinking about transportation, having students arrive at the same time from one household. Makes sense unless you're truly going to stagger it to provide time. Otherwise, you'd just be in a continuous loop twice in the morning. So that's one thing. I think that the work that the elementary is doing now is really looking at the schedules themselves. But without knowing the kids that we're going, where they're coming from, the staff we need to assign them, it gets, there's no definitive answer I can give you tonight except that we're involved in that work deeply right now. Was there another question that you had in there that I didn't try to answer?
Well, it was just one question.
No. It's one three-pronged question, but I think you hit all three sections now.
Okay, thank you. And we will have more data on certain pieces of this once it becomes clearer.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right, so I got a 5-parter.
Just set the expectations from the beginning.
So first off, thank you very much. I think the sheer detail that went into this and the efforts to really illustrate out the process that you went through through this does a lot. And I think it also hopefully communicates to the community just how complex this is. I think actually that heat map that you showed, thinking of that as a and then comparing that back to also all the diversity points that you made, cutting everything in half when it comes to free and reduced lunch, when it comes to the overall size of the schools, like really basically going through in a fine-tooth comb, trying to make sure that this is all as fair as possible when you have such clusters of very, very dense populations like this. I think it's really, really challenging. So I don't know if you could go into any of the details of kind of, did you look at overlays like this when it came to other aspects of kind of making a fair and equitable division between the schools as you're drawing up these maps?
Yeah, we went through an entire process of looking at all these things. We had maps that were, these were the ones that seemed like people would definitely want to see in consideration, but, we could show a map that had an equal distribution of just about any demographic you could think of, and how that would look in the town. The process of putting it all together was definitely challenging, but looking at all of the things considered, this is the recommendation that we came up with.
Excellent. Yeah. Again, I can only imagine how interesting some of those maps looked. So really kind of going through that, I guess to your point, you can make anything perfect if we were to take just random, like almost like Swiss cheese, just kind of pick and choose where we wanted to go. But to really make something that actually was feasible, I really want to commend all of you on the sheer effort there.
Just if I could follow up as well, when you think about any town, I don't know of a town that has a perfect demographic, even distribution and number of students enrolled in their schools evenly. So there's the science of it and the math of it, but also trying to look at how do you get and try to close those gaps. One of the goals that we had was how do we look at demographics and equalize more as a district, knowing that students will continue to move in and progress through. So this is always a moving target too, because demographics change no matter as you continue through the years. And the second thing was really trying to focus on enrollment and making sure that we had the ability and the capacity to educate and try to create as much balance as possible based on the size of schools.
The tricky part with enrollment too is that, particularly at North, if you approach that higher end and we have a sudden turnover of houses or new developments that go on, if we start off the enrollment any higher, it's really going to create a shorter term problem where we're trying to design a boundary line that's going to make it long term.
Excellent. Again, thank you.
All right. So thank you for taking all this information and distilling it to something that's digestible and understandable. Because I know that, as you said, there's a lot of other components to this that you could have included, but I think this was the right balance of information that resonated with people. I did some quick math at this, and you had said the enrollment is 1027 and 904 north and south, and just looking at the numbers compared to capacity, we're talking about 82% capacity north, 78% capacity south. So it resonates with what you just said in terms of if we do get more students in those respective places, we're not necessarily in a space that you're already kind of struggling with capacity. You have that space to absorb more students and deal with the ebbs and flows. So it's one thing I just want to call out, but my question though is clarity on the DT exception. It wasn't a question, it was a comment. So just want to make sure that we are crystal clear with this here. So this is a exception granted to these 25 students, not the 25 families.
This is a recommendation for the 25 fifth grade students. We made this student-centric. And I'm trying to look at the challenge that I have is looking at what do I feel is in the greater good of the community and trying to create the balance we need across the way. So the recommendation is for the 25 students who experienced the move, and that was a way of trying to consider, I've heard, from the community along the way through the redistricting process, and then Mr. Charles, you were a part of it as well. But it was about trying to look at this from who are the actual students, because the siblings are at the same starting point as every other student in the district who is shifting. So it's really hard to strike a balance, and I think the families, that's the empathy piece I have, is around if you're a family and you've experienced moves twice, I understand that piece. I want to just name that. However, it's also, when we get into this type of decision making, you have to look at, if we're going to honor the 25 students who were the remaining fifth graders, about the students who moved, we felt like that was the right recommendation to make, because otherwise it could create a ripple effect where now you've kind of created a policy where you've allowed folks who have never moved to stay, but you're not doing it for the remainder of the community. And I don't want to be in the middle of that thing. So I'd rather stand firm on, I feel like if we're honoring the 25 students who did experience change, that's what we can recommend and commit to. But ultimately, anything beyond that starts to etch away at the boundary line idea, and I think that's where we get into. So that's why it's recommended the way it is, in conjunction with all of the other factors that we've shared among the group. So that's why. And also, the next slide, just to hit on, is to try to avoid having families impacted who've gone through a change. We're trying to come up with solutions that look at the long-term sustainability and balance of our system. And if we were looking at enrollment on an ongoing basis and we had policy that could help us to monitor that, even some thresholds, we could then get into a space where, as new families enroll, if they're near the boundary line and there's a bus stop near where they live that could travel them to a different location, north or south, depending on enrollment, I feel as though it would allow us to equalize over time and not have to, or do nothing and then look 6 years from now and say, we need to redistrict again and change the line. It just seemed as though that was something we consider. Some towns do a buffer zone. We did some focus groups from folks who filled out the survey in the spring. Some of the feedback was around the idea of if maybe a buffer zone isn't needed for a boundary line, and labeling a certain neighborhood as a buffer zone, but more looking at it on a case-by-case basis based on a threshold where we're seeing imbalance. Because the goal here was to try to help us with enrollment increases and declines, and try to help us stabilize. So stabilization is like the key word in our life in many ways.
So yeah, and thank you for that, because I think it just shows that there's a thoughtful approach to taking in consideration like the other circumstances that were specific to certain people. So
Sure.
Appreciate that being part of the overall vision of this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both and to the entire team for putting this together, for just the level of thought and the details of the data that you've been looking at. I mean, it's certainly a monumentous task, so we really appreciate just the work, but also just this recommendation. I think we had just discussed this before, like when we were going into talking about the redistricting, but with the special education programs. So I believe now the goal is to have like the same programs at North and South, if I remember correctly. So of course, some of the existing elementaries are going to be closed and folded in, and then some of the students or families who might be in one part of town are going to different parts. Could we just talk about maybe the continuity of care for those students?
Sure. So I will start, and then Mrs. Morano, if you want to chime in. Our goal over time is if we have students to have fill programs, have them duplicated in both settings. If we don't have enough students to fill one program, we wouldn't divide up a class that's so small that it doesn't make sense. However, we're looking at a model that has 2 schools versus 5, where students we have programs in all of our elementary schools currently. So the idea is that between 2 schools, you've now consolidated some of your programs in those areas. So Mrs. Morano, I'll let you fill in any other blank that you have.
Right, and I mean, it's a specialized program with programming that is provided to students with certain profiles, so that programming will stay the same. The teacher may change, the educational support professional may change or may not change. Who knows? Like, at this point in time, we don't know which staff members are going to which complex. So therefore, I can't, but, you know, we will develop a transition plan for all the students and for the families. We'll ensure that the transition is smooth. We'll bring them in for tours. You know, I know it's challenging for our students in programs, for transitions are difficult and for families. However, we will make it as smooth as possible. We've done it before where we've moved the goals program, which was originally at Kennedy. We moved that to Jefferson during COVID, and it was challenging at first, but then it ended up being a smooth transition. So some of this, like all of our students, staff may change, buildings may change, but, you know, the program will be consistent.
The programs are listed in the story map as well.
They are listed in the story map, and
folks
it
can
was,
see where.
yeah, it was quite reassuring that we could duplicate all programs in both complexes, with the exception of the IDEAS program, but that is fine because that whole group is in the IDEAS program, so, and they're all going to the same school, so it was kind of weird how it worked out, but fortunate.
Well, yeah, thank you for the clarification. It's encouraging to hear that, you know, we do have some experience with the, as you just mentioned, there's a transition during COVID of putting one program into another school, so we do have some experience in this area, and I'm sure knowing you and like how much these programs are on your heart, you're gonna continue to give this the level of care and attention that it deserves, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Both very much.
Thank you. We have tons of questions. I'll make it short this time. First of all, like a great presentation from you and Colin, and I really like the background slide. What you described is very easily to understand. And how did the traffic study take place? Could you please elaborate on that?
Yep, so we hired, we had the plan from KBA and the architects, so within their division as part of their work in the spring, one of their architects was on site to look at traffic flow as students or buses and whatnot entered our facilities. Their focus was looking at Lincoln Street, Calvert Sullivan at first. We have counts from all the schools looking at those complexes and big yellow buses and vans and whatnot. And the town engineer, I spoke with the town engineer to invite them to the meeting that Colin referenced earlier, where the town engineer has in-depth knowledge of our town, and what we didn't want to have happen is someone who's doing a study from out. That's a great perspective, but we also need to think about the folks who work within, so it seemed like get everybody at the same table at the same time. So the town engineer who works for the DPW will be at our next meeting. He's well aware of our master plan and the recommendations and kind of how this is laying out, and we're hopeful that through that collaboration and working with us, we'll be able to provide the best plan possible that we can to mitigate some of the traffic areas. And I'm thinking about Simon Sinek when he talks about when the pilot's flying and you don't hear anything and you get turbulence, you get a little freaked out. But when they say, hey, we're going to hit turbulence and we're managing it, and I always like to know if the pilot flew in Vietnam or something, it always makes me feel better, but ultimately what I'd say to the community is there will be some growing pains as we go through some of these pieces. There may be things that are adjustments to us around certain parts of this that are part of the change, but we're taking this with the seriousness it deserves and trying to get as much information so that we can provide as much information to the community and engage them in thoughtful ways as we move forward, once those communities are established especially.
Thank you. And I have one request for you, Lucas and the chairman, to extend more time for the voting on this. Instead of October 8th, extend more time to understand more better, meeting with so many parents. And that's all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And O'Sullivan.
I don't have a lot actually after a lot of those questions, but I do want to commend you guys. This has been, and Colin, great work. Like, thank you for stepping up this summer. Like, it is so great to have you there and know that, like, Lucas has this kind of support around him. So thank you and great job. You can tell you know this information inside and out. You really dug in. I do want to point out that you know, this is a lot more than what we've heard from some of the leadership in Franklin, which was to take a crayon and draw a line down the middle of a map. certainly is a lot more than that. And I've been seeing a lot of the emails come over from people who have sort of specific situations. And I guess you spoke about this when it came to like the DT families as opposed to the DT students. I think it's important to note that, you know, when it comes to specific, I just want people to understand that we are a very large district. And I don't know if you want to speak to this, but the idea of sort of cherry picking certain situations that maybe a bus stop is near your corner or things like that, it just seems like something that we really, I don't want to get ahead of myself or ahead of the vote, but to try to have these specific one-offs, I think could cause a complete out of control spiral for us. So I guess I just want to kind of say that to the public, that it's not that we're not hearing them. And I'm glad you guys are having the forum also. I guess, is there any specific thought about some of the larger apartment complexes that, like, are any of those close to the boundary line that could, you know, I know like those aren't filled yet over at the Starbucks area. That's pretty clearly on, you know, the side of the boundary line. But I just know, like, I know like with those Westerly apartments, my family specifically, when we were moving to Franklin, we stayed there for 6 months while we were house hunting. And I know that was like a complicated thing where you had to put certain kids at certain schools. There were kids within the apartment complexes that had to go other places. Does this solve for that, or do any of these big apartment complexes, do they factor in? Because I do hear the town council in town saying when the planning board and the zoning board and they're putting these big apartment ideas forward, often they'll say these apartments don't attract families. But I'm not so sure that that's the case. Have there been studies about that or thoughts about that?
Well, I think a big part is we only can work with the information we have right now and the residency as
Currently.
the students enrolled. So I think we've developed a recommendation to accommodate any fluctuation in potential enrollment on either side by creating a fairly balanced number between both sites.
Okay. Yeah, not too complicated, but that's all I have for now. Great job, you guys.
All right, so one more question I have at the moment. So just to confirm that the attendance area consideration, right now, that's just something to consider. There's not a specific line or a policy change that's going to be immediately implemented. Is that correct?
Correct. We don't have specific language around a threshold of if imbalance between a north and a south, like that idea. We have language around assignments of schools. We have a policy on when students move within the district. I gave the example today to a parent that was around when students move and sell a house within Franklin and move to another part of Franklin. If it's after the April break, rather than having them transition to their school, they can finish the school year out and then they start in the fall in the next school. Right, that idea. There's policy around those types of things, but specifically to our new organization as a community, we don't have specific language about this that exists. So
no, that's okay. And I think
Yeah.
it is great though to kind of to be looking at something like that and to kind of be forward thinking, just so that way, yeah, we don't all of a sudden kind of find ourselves with that. When you kind of mentioned that, like the overutilization. Flash back to Dr. Hearn was here and you were kind of putting together the slide deck that talked about, where, all of those numbers were, and there were some that were in green because they were underutilized and all the ones that were glaring red because they were overutilized. It at least kind of really helps to future-proof a lot of the decisions that we're looking to do moving forward. So I think it's a great idea, but again, just wanted to kind of make sure that everybody was on the same page.
And just to be clear, the vote for the line is the vote for attendance area. This, to me, belongs back with the policy subcommittee to start. You're not voting on this. This is just an idea that I wanted to be transparent with the community around our thinking, and with you all specifically, just to be clear.
No, absolutely, and I really appreciate that, so thank you very much.
Sure. All right, kind of go back down the line.
This is a one-part question. You're welcome. So can you talk a little bit about, once a line is established, teachers and their assignments, is there consideration happening for, familiar faces from, should this line be followed, the kiddos from Oak Street who are heading south, or the kiddos from Keller who are heading south, that they're gonna find familiar faces among the staff within the buildings that they would be headed to?
It's difficult to predict where all staff will go because there's a few things at play. We need to work with our leadership team, we have to work with the union, we have to look at the contractual obligations around seniority.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I envision that when we put on, the other thing is, where do people see themselves? Their skill set, their grade, they want to take, those all factor in. So how it shakes out over time, we have to work very closely with our leadership team and the union on how that all will shake out. But ultimately, I would say is, I'm envisioning and anticipating that there will be familiar faces. And the other thing is I think when we think of it from a deficit mindset versus an advantage mindset or an improvement, is you're expanding the social network as well for students. So I know new students is like, that's always challenging, but when you're in a situation where you're not the only new one who moved to a school, but you're part of a community of folks who are all moving with an intentional thought around how to build new communities for folks that are transitioning, I think it's a bit of a mindset shift on how we really look at this. So I'm not saying that to shift the thought like, hey, suppress your feelings and, let's go. But at the same time, I think it's an honest comment I have is around, there will be new faces, but there will also be some familiar faces. And the makeup of that and the dynamic, I think there's opportunity there as we look at that too. And I wouldn't want to just live in this being grief or loss, but also the flip side is also looking for opportunities too, as we move to this particular model. So I can't speak specifically to where each staff will go, but there will be a process that will be followed in order to figure out where staff should be placed based on their interest, based on where they best fit and how that's done, and we'll do that. So.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Comment and then a question, if that's all right. I promise the question's easy and the comment's not. So part of I did want to kind of take a moment. I know emails were brought up earlier. We have gotten quite a few, and actually, administration's been able to share more with us. I really wanted to commend the parents that have reached out. The vast majority have been, whether support or against, they've been well put together, they've been thoughtful, they've been understanding, and I think they've been, I don't want to say easy to read. Some of them have actually been very, very detailed, and I think it's great. It says a lot about the passion that that parents have for their kids, but it really kind of keeps everything in focus. And I really wanted to make sure to commend the community on that. I think it means a lot, and given the year that we've had, both from a school perspective and from the town perspective, it's really great to see people kind of taking that approach. So I do ask that as we continue going through this overall process, please keep that up. Again, these are going to people in the community. We're reading them. We are listening. We do care, and it really means a lot to us when that same kind of compassion is shown both ways. So I do appreciate that, and it really has been the number of the emails that we've gotten in support or against certain aspects of what was understood at the time when this was put out have all been not necessarily positive, but they've all been understanding. They've been kind of very targeted in the approach, not just kind of a blanket. None of this is great. None of this is good. What are you doing? And I really, really appreciate that, as I'm sure our admin team does as well. So one quick thing I wanted to touch on actually was the survey that we had talked about. We had mentioned the focus groups with some of the parents, and I've gotten some feedback that I don't know whether there was a glitch in the system somewhere or it just didn't necessarily capture things correctly. It seems like I think more people signed up, and a lot of people are excited to kind of continue to contribute on that front. That might have been left off. Again, I know that the system has been interesting at best, but want to see if we could potentially either whether we look at it again test it, make sure that we have all the people involved, or if there's some kind of, I believe we had, when we spoke earlier, some new people have signed up recently. We can't tell whether they're people who are re-signing up or if they are new signups, but some kind of mechanism around that to make sure that we're capturing all those parents who are willing to give us hours upon hours of their time. I want to make sure they understand the commitment here.
Yes, and just to reference what Mr. Griffith's referencing, when we had put out that survey in the spring, we had parents who had signed up through the survey. We invited the ones that we had in the queue. What we've heard from some folks is that they submitted it, but we don't have a record of it. So if it's a glitch in the system, I apologize to anyone who originally signed up. There will be other opportunities to sign up, and some may have filled out the district-wide one. But what we did is we invited the families that had signed up through the spring that we were aware of and offered the opportunity to come in to do a bit of a, hey, the story map is out, we're looking for some initial feedback, almost like a focus group to try to get some, and it was really, really helpful. I learned a ton, we incorporated a ton. Some of the emails we received, we tried to bake in some answers to things that have come our way. But I also think about when the communities are established and families know where they're attending school and they're hearing from their principals and they're looking for opportunities to come in and talk through all of the aspects of school that parents can become involved with as we look to transition. I see that as more of an opportunity. And I can tell you, we're really trying to get to the point where I feel like we're on we're moving down the yard lines and we're trying to move so that we can get the ball distributed a bit to some of the leaders, get to know the principals of the future school, and engage in some of the things that have to do with how are we going to open the school year up? What's on your mind? What would be impactful? What would be meaningful? Hey, we have a schedule we're putting together. We're looking for some feedback on that. So I think those are opportunities as we continue. It's just been more centric because we've been living in operations as the first start to build and frame the work. So there will be more opportunity. Parents can expect to hear and engage, and whether it's through a district opportunity or a school-based opportunity, we've already talked as a team about looking for those opportunities, St. Page folks. Open houses, building transitions. Mrs. Morano talked about transitions for students in our specialized programs. Those would apply to all of our students in the district as well, depending on where they're enrolled.
I could just add a little, so of the folks that initially filled out that survey, all 13 of them were sent an email to come to that focus group. After we had sent out that email, we did get 9 more responses. But that was after meeting with the focus group or like after that invitation went out. But yes, we will make sure that those folks that have filled it out will be included in the coming opportunities.
Sounds good. And maybe we could send, kind of basically building on that, send out that email, say, hey, great, thank you so much for volunteering your time. And then let the community know whether it's at this meeting or kind of a group-wide email saying, we have sent that email. If you didn't get it, you're not on the list. If you want to be a part of it, here's kind of that last chance, just so we can try to catch if anything does fall between the cracks, like submit and it just didn't compute or something didn't kick through. I don't know exactly what, but just kind of one last way to try and make sure that we're catching everyone who's willing to give their time. Thanks. Excellent. Thank you.
So during the presentation, there was mention about Beaver Street and Pleasant Street in terms of where you live on the side of it. Can you repeat that a little bit so I just want to make sure folks got that and I got it clearly?
Sure. So anybody who has an address on Beaver Street or Pleasant Street, doesn't matter what side of the street, if you have an address on that street, you are assigned to the north in this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So even though if you look at the map and you zoom in, it could overlap. It's physically, if your address says Pleasant or Beaver, you are north.
Correct.
Thank you.
We talked about this in tonight's budget subcommittee meeting, and you touched upon it a little bit in your final slide on the timeline here, but could you expand upon the importance of having the boundary decision in terms of this year's budget development process?
Yes, so as you know, we've started the joint budget subcommittee process. October 23rd is our next meeting for that. One of the things that we need to do in order for us to build the budget in time, we've put together, I'm going to be sending that out to the school committee, a more aggressive timeline just to keep pace with where the town wants to be, but also ultimately we've moved our budget up. And we're building new schools as a new organization, right? So the key factor is when students are assigned, staff are assigned. And the way we make up for any kind of demographic imbalance is by the allocation of resources. So equity comes with, if you see a higher percentage at a specific school in a specific demographic area, you address that through the equity in which you distribute staff. So if you had, I'll make it up, 20 students who needed support in one area, and you had 40 students in another, you might have one staff for those 20, but you might need 2 for the 40. Does that make sense? So it's not so much equal, like we just drop 1 staff in each building, or drop 2 staff in each building. You're trying to look at the numbers and the ratios and make sure you assign the appropriate resources and allocate them that way. But in order for us to get to the space where we have that information and we're able to build schedules, the line has to be set, because as you go to the slide that has the classes and the structure, we have to look at it. The recommendation has these as your classes, but the team of principals needs time to figure out. We've already mapped this physically, but ultimately the schedule and how it rotates, and when kids eat lunch and when they go to recess and whatnot, all those things, and what staff do we need at each building. It all applies because we want to start doing staff surveys to get that information. So it's part of a bigger puzzle, but the longer we wait on also assigning this attendance line, we push out everything. So I'm not saying that to create undue stress or pressure. I'm just trying to lay out the next steps and how they work, which was why we tried to get that story map out as soon as we could. We needed to kick the year off, because could you imagine if we put this out in August, there would have been no focus on the start. And we had a really good start to the school year despite all we've been through. And I've heard that from parents, students, and teachers. But now we're at the place where this information is key for us to continue developing. If you move to the next slide column, 16, right? Last point, Dave, I know you don't want to belabor it, but. Oh, this one, I'm sorry, 6. Staff assignments, budget development, scheduling. Our PCCs, we have a meeting on October 15th. But one of the questions that came up when we met with the PCCs in the summer was like, without knowing which PCC you might work with, it's hard to start to plan and move forward in a way that's like concrete. So it kind of stays in the philosophical. So that's kind of the idea. And then transportation, as we talked about. When we know the student assignments, we can then start to look at the map, look at the 2-mile radius, look at free and reduced numbers within 2 miles, start to map out transportation in a way that's effective, and start to build out that model as well.
Thank you for that clarification and giving us the picture of how this fits into the broader budget situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas, for explaining again and again and again. So much patience. Thanks very much. And see that when we divided like in the borderline north versus south, the south I figured out like the more apartment complex, but the student baseline is north versus south. Is more north has 10%, more than 10% students. Could you please explain again for the folks out there?
The question is around
North
and south distribution, and
north has
Heat
more
maps you're
students.
talking about.
the heat map.
The heat map, go to the heat map.
Oh, the concentration of students and why the line is where it is.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah, so the line, so again, if you look at the heat map, you can really see the dense populated areas and not. So in the center of town, like we said, is a really, really dense area. And looking at the northern part of town is really highly dense as well, comparatively to the south where there's more empty spaces. So in order to keep a balanced enrollment and not to exceed building capacity, the line needs to be set at that point. If you drop it down any more, it's going to create an imbalance and get really close or exceed the functional capacity. And again, we're trying to create a long-term solution here that can deal with changing demographics, changing of houses, new developments, and all that. So we can be more flexible within enrollment changes.
If you go to one slide earlier too, just the overlay, I would point out that because the decision was made when Davis Thayer closed to move a whole elementary school to Keller, if you look, if at the time of a closure they were distributed amongst where they are in proximity or with balance to elementary schools, you may have seen that, that section divided differently and dispersed. It wasn't. That's why we're trying to honor on the back end of the 5th grade. But ultimately, if you look there, in a technical distribution of students based on the location of a school and the elementary schools closest to where they live, the proximity would have put you at either Oak or Parmenter in many of the cases there. 4 years later, we've lived in a model where our Keller Elementary has had the most students because it's basically combined 2 of our elementary schools. But the line was not drawn, this was data driven, it was actually something we discovered later, that the logical place to put the line was there, and it was in line with some of the boundary work that occurred in 2003. So I would just point that out as well, to just point out it's because of where people live and the population density in those particular areas.
Thank you.
Ruth Ann?
I'm all set for now, thanks.
And then, actually one kind of comment, just a question to piggyback on that as well. So with the boundary lines, as outlined, you know, they got challenges, but there's different, you know, north is a higher population, just, you know, the in values a little bit higher. But then over at south, they have other, especially when we look at those differences, the other page kind of talked about, you know, free and reduced lunch, English language learners. Any ideas on kind of how you would address some of those differences with, you know, just higher populations or other projected demos?
Sure. So you'll see more class sections at Keller in certain area. I mean, in the north, at Lincoln Street. But then what you'll see is wherever there's a demographic difference. I mentioned this earlier, but just to kind of hit on it, you start to look at what are your demographics, and if I happen to look at, we have a 2% difference in students in IEPs. So special educators, by and large, depending on the needs of the kids, which can vary, but ultimately you've closed the gap in that particular number, right? But if I look at a different area, wherever we see where there's a difference, if there's an impact on kids where more support is needed in one area or the other, that's how you start to assign. So you're not going to have the identical staff at any building, but it's going to be built on the needs of the kids as you assign. So if you look at English language learners and you start to see moving from the 7% difference to the 4% difference, if that was to be looking at the data and the number of kids and the services needed, if we can do the same work and provide the same level of high quality instruction and support for students with the same staff, great. If there's more students in a particular pocket in a grade, an area, then we'll look at the staffing like we do every year when we build our budgets. We start to look at what are the needs of the kids and how do we best support them. So that's what I would say is about just distributing the resources we have, and having it under 2 roof and 1 roof for the middle school cuts down on the 35 to 40 people who travel, who are divided among schools, who have to use travel time to get across. That number might be off, but I thought I saw that today in one of the reports. So I just think when we think about all those factors, that's where these came from.
That's great. No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, keep going down the line.
Just one more 2-pronged question. I appreciate all the extra information, certainly a lot of more clarifying information than was sent out as a starter last week. Will this presentation be on the redistricting webpage for folks that may have missed part of the presentation tonight?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. And then looking forward to the community discussion next week. Can you again share the details on when that will be? And I suspect that maybe that is an app opportunity.
Stole my thunder a little bit. So yes, all kidding aside, yes, we will communicate that to families. It is intended to be on Monday, September 30th, 7 to 8:30. We're looking at the high school library as a location. We have to confirm that. but we'll put in writing exactly where it will happen. The goal of this was to, you know, we recognize every family's in a different place and there are different circumstances and thoughts and considerations, but in order to kind of not create a chilling effect of you have to come up and say your whole life story, we thought, why don't we create an opportunity where we're available, we're listening. I want to be clear, the line, we put a lot of effort into explaining the line and why, but ultimately we want to provide that opportunity. We also see it as a great opportunity to come in and that I can envision, I already know of a few folks who are excited to just like, who is that principal? I don't know who that person is, but I think they're going to look for opportunities to come in and meet and greet and just get a sense of the people. If they're at a different place where they're like, you know what, I'm ready for this and we're ready to go. It felt like the first opportunity to come in and seek out someone who will be leading in the school where your recommended area is. So I think it's twofold, and we see it as an opportunity to just take some more feedback, listen to kind of are there things we didn't consider. We don't claim to know everything, but what I can tell you is we put a lot of effort into coming up with what we feel is sustainable, because we also have to think about in 5 years, 6 years, it'll be a whole different group of families that'll be in the district. So when you create lines like this, you can't just focus, because you end up with problems down the road. It becomes very short-sighted. And as I said earlier, it's like, how do we set this up to be straight and ready for us as we move forward into the future?
I think that following that meeting, if possible, if there are things that come up, like you said, that are, you know, unexpected considerations or anything like that, like I'm sure that we would love to hear kind of an
Sure.
update following that meeting.
You can expect an update.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I'll just add a brief thing to make sure that it's clear to folks. I know there's been some discussion around the overall capacity difference. You know, North has a lot more room, you know, the capacity there is much higher. Why don't we kind of shift more people up? I did want to make sure that I heard it correctly. There's only 101 student difference in the two schools.
Correct.
We're not talking some gigantic variation here. We don't have huge capacity in the north and, you know,
Correct.
600 students in the south. Really, it is a rather small window of difference between the two. So getting this right and kind of right down the middle in a sustainable fashion is even more important, because we can't just kind of snap our fingers and wholesale move a large number of people to one school or the other. We don't have that capability. We're really kind of targeting a good and balanced setup as it stands now.
That was the strategy.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Something you said it stuck with me. And just thinking of where we're at from a financial standpoint, budget-wise, you know, all the dollars matter. So you mentioned there's 35 teachers or educators.
I knew you were going to call me on this.
Yeah, right.
I should have verified that.
No,
number.
it doesn't matter to them, but there are educators that are traveling
There are
from school to
educators
school.
traveling throughout
Yeah.
the district.
So and as a result, are we paying for their travel to go from school to school in addition to their normal salary?
An itinerant who travels throughout the district is salaried, and then what they do is travel time's built into their schedule to get to both schools to perform the services and functions for the students. 35 might not be right. I'm getting some eyes right now.
Okay,
So let's just scrap
But yes,
that.
we do reimburse them from either.
So we do reimburse them, but then
Yes.
also there's that lost time being in front of our students because they're traveling throughout the day.
I'm gonna have to count myself in the equation now and figure out who
Yes.
I.
But I just want to call it out for
Yeah.
folks, though, there are a lot of benefits to this work that's being done, because as a result of this happening, we won't have to do the traveling anymore, or at least it'll be significantly reduced.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll have the teachers in front of the students, in front of the people's children where we want them to be, versus in a car traveling back and forth, and, you know, God forbid weather comes up and you're trying to go down to a different school and it takes you, you know, 3 times as much because it's a lot of snow, you know?
Yes.
So, just putting it in the context of the benefits that we're gonna get from this.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
I don't have any other questions. I appreciate the detail and the level of work that went into this, and I appreciate the questions from my colleagues. And yeah, thank you for all that you've been doing on this, and look forward to next week's discussion with the community and the work going forward.
Definitely. Thank you. I don't want to jump everything on one day on Lucas. Thank you.
one, Colin, everything the work that's gone into this is spectacular. This is on top of being an award-winning director of services, is that correct?
I suppose.
I really want to commend you. This is incredible work that you've just taken upon yourself. And I know that there was, a lot of hands and a team that kind of went into this, but really to be able to kind of show multiple different maps and to look at the different demographics, all across the board. The work that went into this is, incalculable, and I really thank you for all that you've done on top of your normal 9 to 5. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
She's good.
What's that?
All good, thank you.
One more shout out to Ruth Ann.
I'm all set, guys. Thank you.
Then I think one last thing I might just kind of self-close on. I think one, I've heard it said before, there's really kind of 3 big things to try to avoid, in a school committee: overrides, school closures, and redistricting. And hiring the superintendent, and hiring the superintendent, we'll toss that in there too. I think for the community, these, as Lucas, as you kind of started out with by naming it, these are incredibly difficult, challenging choices that we're having to make. And I think that it's a lot, especially those 3, are a lot of topics that had been talked about for the past 15 years and that either weren't done or half measures were taken. It'd be wonderful to, I was just talking with a friend just a bit ago right before this, to kind of almost go back to boring. To kind of have school committee meetings where we're talking about and debating whether or not we should be having, single-use utensils or, or metal. Oh, we're at some point, we're gonna have an hour-long debate about whether or not what utensils that we're using and what's in the best interest. And that's what we would hope to do. These big changes, it's not, I'm sure none of us signed up for this. It's nothing that anyone is excited about. It's hard choices that impact every single one of us. I know, my guy, in this model, his school closed, we move into a new school. It's tough, but the idea of this providing stability for the future is so key. So that way, it's none of these big 3 and 4. The superintendent, Lucas, please stick around for as long as you can. It's the hope is that we can do it once and rip the Band-Aid and be done with it for years, if decade to come. I sincerely wish this for all of the parents like myself who have kids in the school system, that this wasn't something that you or that your kiddo has to go through. This was something that was done years ago, but unfortunately it's just not the case. And we're here, and we just shouldn't continue to kind of kick the can down the road for another couple of years or put a Band-Aid on something to try to hold it together for a little bit longer. And so my apology to those parents and those families in the community. We are where we are, but the idea is if we can, when we do this right, it's something that we're not going to have to keep going back to the well. Lucas, you kind of mentioned that there are some districts where they redistrict, every year, every other year. This idea is to do it, to set it, and then to move forward and to have those boring debates about utensils. But I thank you all, though, for the engagement that you have. And I'm also going to have one more plug, too, when we kind of talk about engagement. Because as big as these changes are, We've talked about it a whole bunch today and in every other meeting before in terms of the finances, that the town of Franklin is really looking at upwards of a $5 million deficit in the next budget cycle. There's a big joint budget meeting coming up on October 23rd, and I'm sure we'll talk about more in a little bit, but if you're listening now, schools occupy over 50% of the overall budget. So we might be looking at $2.5 million of cuts from this year's budget, which was cut from last year's budget, which was cut from the year before that. I know everything that we're talking about here, it's massive change and it's scary. The financial future is equally, or if not more, terrifying. Please, please continue to stay engaged. Tune into all of these meetings to get a better understanding about the financial crisis that we're in, and what may happen moving forward. But I always appreciate anytime we have people here in council chambers. I see the numbers online. I know there's a lot that watch at home and on YouTube as well. Please continue to stay engaged. I know this is a lot, but there's just so much going on. But that, again, I want to thank you both, the whole team, so much for everything that you've done with this.
Thank you.
One moment to kind of get back on the seats. And then just for those following along with the agenda, again, discussion item A and B took out of order and already took care of. So we'll be moving on to discussion only items.
There's 3 discussion-only items in your packet. One is an update, an annual report from the Massachusetts Organization of Educational Collaboratives. You've received these from time to time. We put them in the packet so you can get a sense of what's happening at, but we're members of both the BICO and the ACCEPT collaboratives, so that's part of the work. They put out an annual report for your review. The second item is a transportation update. I'm going to kick it over to Ms. Malati to provide what I hope is the final update related to the start of the school year for transportation, and I'll kick it over to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Quick update on transportation. Our wait list, I don't know if you remember, if you recall, a couple weeks ago we had about 6 students on our wait list. Right now we don't have any students waitlisted. Those are students that registered before the deadline and newly registered students to the district. However, we are still trying to collect all payments. There are some payments that still need to be received. We currently have 69 people who still need to fully pay their balance or sign up for a payment plan. And these payments are due by Friday, September 27th. An email went out yesterday, the 23rd, to families with an open balance with instructions on how to make the payment, when it's due, and an option to set up a payment plan if needed. If payment's not received in full, or if a payment plan is not requested by Friday the 27th, the student will be unassigned from the bus and a refund will be issued pending the return of the bus pass if one was issued to that student. The bus driver will check their bus list to confirm the child is assigned to the bus. If the child is not on their list, they will be allowed to ride in the morning, as the bus drivers are instructed not to leave children behind, but they will not be able to board the bus in the afternoon. The bus lists are all live documents. They're shared with both the schools and the bus companies. So any changes that we make on our end, it's updated at the same time for schools and the bus transportation company. Most of the bus passes were printed and delivered to the schools, but we did run into an issue with our printer. So we still have about 50 passes to print. They will be printed and delivered to the schools by Friday the 27th.
The bus drivers are instructed not to request for bus passes until we confirm with them that we delivered them all. Also, some bus routes may have changed in order for us to accommodate the waitlisted students, but we did send out emails to all families impacted, so they are aware if any changes to their particular route were made. If you registered and you don't require a bus seat, please fill out the refund request form. It's attached to this document, and it's also in the transportation page on the Franklin PS website. Once you fill out that form, you can email it to schoolbus@franklinps.net, and we can process your refund. We will issue the refund once the bus pass is returned to the secretary, and she confirms it. That's it for me, and I'm open to questions if you have any.
Thank you very much.
No questions for me.
Just one question. So 69 people, yeah, it's a decent amount. So thank you for the explanation around the process. So the child will be able to go to school. The only thing is that they won't be able to ride back. Is there a plan to communicate to the parents? So the child goes to school that day, they didn't pay. Before the end of the day happens, will the parent be communicated to and
Yes.
know that they have to come pick up their child or
Definitely, yeah.
make a payment? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it's not a surprise that you're in Boston and it's like 3 o'clock. It's like, all right, come pick up your kid. So, but thank you for this thorough detail. I know you said this would be the last one, but could we get another update around non-payments? Thank you.
Yes, payment-wise, I mean, I know the 69 people, it's a huge number, but just put into perspective, we have less than $29,000 to collect, which is great compared to 2 weeks ago. We had over $400,000 to be paid. So we did send out like weekly communications to families, and some of them sign up for payment plans. It's mostly the remaining $140 from the increased fee, because it used to be $360. So most of them pay the $360, hoping that they won't need to pay the $140, which is not the case, but
Understood. Thank you.
no problem.
I could just add, the parents have to pay or request a payment plan by the 27th. So the onus is on the parents to communicate with us if they need a, I just can anticipate a Facebook boil up around a student was not allowed to get on the bus. And I want to be clear, while in a proactive sense, so we're not chasing a reactive thing, we don't have time to do that. The adult in the house that has children needs to communicate if they need to be on a payment plan, and they need to let us know so that we can avoid having the kid involved at all in any or any kind of situation that disrupts transportation. So I want to just say, we've sent direct emails, we will do it again, but I just want to say it out loud now so that we don't have a storyline that takes off that's misinformed and creates undue amount of time and bandwidth on my department to have to respond to. So communicate if you need a plan, pay if you're able to, but those are the options that allow us to continue to work and move forward. And we want to help support families. We recognize that there are costs associated with all of this, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't protect the people who are working extremely hard to solve a very complex issue, and have worked tirelessly to make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one more question is result. The payment plan, it's not like the free lunch, reduced lunch, so you have to provide any proof. It's just a request. So
Yes.
if you just
Yeah.
needed to break it up,
Right.
it's a simple
Yeah,
ask.
we,
Okay.
we usually break it out into 4 payments. So if a family still has a $500, so it gets spread out like every 2 weeks, they pay $125, and
Thank you.
no problem.
No questions, but just thank you very much for all the hard work you've been doing. Yeah, getting this list down to 0, I'm sure is a monumental success, so thank you so much for your hard work and dedication on this.
Thank you.
No, all good, thank you.
Yeah, it's seriously unbelievable, just from the number of students that were on the wait list down to this, to the amount of debt that needed to be collected down to what it is. Outstanding. You know, there's a lot of folks wearing multiple hats, Lucas, in your department, and I thank you all so much. One specific question though, just when it comes to the refund. So, because I remember when we were going through like the meal charge and that refund, there was the notion of, almost like transaction fees or like, so if we're kind of lost money that we're kind of paying. If it gets to a point where the bus pass is now recollected, we kind of go and refund. Are we then allowing that individual, a couple of weeks later to say, actually, I do need to ride the bus, let me sign it back up and pay?
I don't see why not,
Okay.
as long as they, they have to pay the fee, and if we have if we have an open spot on the bus, then.
They'd just be re-waitlisted if there was no room. They'd have to get back in the queue. If they chose to receive a refund, they'd basically be unenrolled from our bus program.
Yeah.
But then if they made a choice later to say, I would like to do it again, they'd have to get back in the queue, just like a.
They would have to redo
ticket
the whole
sale.
process,
Mhm.
register in Aspen, then go to Unipay and pay the fee.
Okay.
And then that would be our cue to add them to the wait list and assign the child to the bus if a spot was available.
Okay, but just in terms of any, almost like an Amazon, like a restocking fee. If we're, is there much of a service charge if we're giving that money back to the client?
We usually prorate the refund, but because of all the issues that happened, transportation-wise, we are fully refunding. We are not prorating at this point.
Okay.
However, if they went through all this and they request a refund, let's say in January, we won't be able to issue a full refund.
There'll be a transition point,
Yeah.
but people who, we didn't want to de-incentivize folks who don't need to ride either, to say, we don't need to ride, because that frees up space for folks that were on the wait list,
Mhm.
so.
Okay.
There will be a point where we have to, consider that.
Sorry,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
it made me think of something I forgot to ask. Can we get a formalized policy for refunds for buses? Because I don't think we have one, so I don't know, Ruth Ann, if that's something that you can tee up.
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we could just, I know a couple of months ago, just did the fully revitalize the meal charge. Yeah, we could definitely kind of take a look into that, see what MASC has as well.
Fee refunds.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Okay, all right, staffing update.
Staffing update, so Mr. Sterlazzi put together a staffing update. As of September 24th, we filled 60 positions. We currently have 3 teaching vacancies, 5 ESPs, 15 non-union, and 3 were newly added non-union positions due to resignations that we received. The number of new resignations significantly decreased since Mr. Sterlazzi's last report, and a breakdown was provided for you within the packet. We're onboarding a few folks from the last meeting, September 10th, to bring on, and the number continues to decrease in some of our positions in some of our areas. We'll continue to provide updates on hiring until we're at a place where we're fielding close to or the full team as we set out, but ultimately I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have around that.
Thank you.
It's very interesting, just looking at the staffing report, and I think it actually brings up something that was addressed at the Joint Budget Subcommittee that I want to make sure people here are clear about. And just because the sheer numbers are not equal, right? So if we say we've let go of a certain number of teachers, certain number of professionals, and then been able to bring back a certain number, or we've had a certain number of resignations, those are not one-to-one. So like a paraprofessional and a special educator are not the same. We can't just shift people left and right and just
Yes.
make everything happen magically. There is actually a significant impact. Basically, we get hit twice. We don't get some special benefit that we've been hiding from the community, where as we have resignations, we suddenly have new places for all the teachers we had to let go to suddenly show up in. We suffer again. So
Yes.
I want to make sure that was clear. I think that was really a big miss at the budget subcommittee, where it sounded like people are just really excited, where a body was let go, a new position exists, you just shove them together and it's guaranteed to work. And I want to make sure that people understand just how complicated and how different the positions are across the board. We really don't have that kind of plug and play capability. Each one of these is either unique in one way or another, or highly specialized in other ways that do not allow that to be possible. So this is a very big lift for y'all. I understand, and I really appreciate that. And I know that you have tried to bring back teachers as much as we can, but it's just, especially with numbers like this, it's not feasible. It's not the simple solution that some people make it out to be.
Mhm.
It's a lot more complex, has a lot more challenge, and there's never going to be this easy, we just wait until enough people resign and we're going to fix everything kind of deal. So I really appreciate the updates here.
So in the middle level, I see that we're missing a computer science teacher. Is this a position that's traveling to support, make sure that we have coverage at all three schools, or is there a gap at one of the schools?
No, there's a retirement coming up, so we're this will be a vacancy. There's currently a teacher there.
Okay, perfect.
So it's vacancy, but
Yeah,
it's
but it's not
anticipated
a
for someone who's
Gotcha, so you're proactively looking to fill it before the retirement occurs.
avoid a
Very,
gap.
very,
in
very
service.
strategic, yeah. And then I noticed in the high school level, the librarian vacancy is closed. So does this mean now we've met our minimum requirement for accreditation?
Yes,
Or at
sir.
least for when we get
Yes.
assessed?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, okay. So I know a lot of folks were thinking about that and like, what does that mean for their students that are graduating? So glad to see that that's been rectified, and hopefully we have the continued funds to keep these positions employed so that we don't fall in this position again.
Correct.
Thank you.
One thing, just to kind of add, my colleague, Paul, what you were talking about too, from that joint budget, because when we did have to go through a number of layoffs, dozens of layoffs last year because of budgetary, crisis that we're in, not only is it just a direct loss to the students, but then they kind of, in the joint budget brought up the unemployment costs that the town and the taxpayers are now having to pay for the teachers that we were no longer able to afford to pay. And so it's just this constant rippling effect of when if we don't have the money to provide the level of services that the entire town expects, we lose those services of great teachers, and then now we also have to pay more money in terms of unemployment benefits, and that these resignations are not, like you said, like that one-to-one transferable. That the number of positions that were lost, may still be paying unemployment certainly throughout the summer. So it's an unfortunate, slippery slope that we've been on, for many, many years now. That it's unfortunate to see.
Thank you.
All right. On to, I've been checking, which is good. Thank you, though. Confirm with Andy, good?
Yep, you guys hit on everything that I would have rambled on about, so thank you.
All right, so we got information matters. Actually, you know what, Ruth Ann, I'll go right to you with policy.
So I think we are just going to continue having policy meetings the same as we did before, Dave and Dave, you guys know that. So we haven't had our first yet. Our first will be 2 weeks from tonight, and there's a new policy that we have to go over with Tina, Title 9, and it's nothing too exciting to go over, but MASC gave us some updates. So, but I did make note of what you said, Al, because it should be pretty clear cut to do a bus or just ordinary fees refunded. I don't know if Tina wants to add anything to that, but we do have the crowdfunding thing going on now, and I hope some teachers are starting to take advantage of that. So hopefully that'll come to fruition.
Terrific. And how about mental health task force? And I'll let you go.
We have a booth coming up at Harvest Fest that I will be at for the beginning at least. So that'll be good on the 28th. And we are situated right next to the school committee, so should be easy to find us.
Thank you. All right, then superintendent evaluation.
nothing to report this time.
But what about budget?
Budget met this evening where we discussed the financial assistance, both the criteria as well as the application process for the sports fees as well as ECVC fees. And we also discussed the FY26 budget timeline.
All right, let's see, community relations.
So for community relations, we do have the Harvest Fest on Saturday from 12 to 5. Weather looks like it's going to be good, so hopefully there is no rain delay. So I did send you all the sign-up sheet for coverage. As of right now, all times except for 2 to 3 p.m. are covered. So hopefully somebody that hasn't signed up yet can sign up. We will have handouts, bags, magnets, so definitely a great place to talk to us, ask questions, especially with what we just talked about today with the school boundary stuff, and just things to come. So definitely love to see you all there and see our new banner. I think that'll be really, really cool. We haven't had our first meeting yet, but we've been having conversations. It's scheduled for October 15th from 5:30 to 6:30.
And joint PCC.
Joint PCC, so our first meeting for the year is for October 15 from 7 to 8. The plan was to wait until after this meeting so that we could talk through what the impacts are to the PCCs, but we do have a slew of agenda items that we're going to talk through just to figure out how do we move forward now that we have boundary line information, because it will be after the 8th. The vote will be done at that point, so it will be more clear as to what the layout will be.
Okay. Swag?
Swag is scheduled for October.
Okay. And DEI? Okay. All right. Go to consent agenda.
I recommend approval of the minutes from your September 10th, 2024 school committee meeting as detailed. I recommend acceptance of 2 checks totaling $647 as follows. $525 for JFK PCC field trips and $122 for Bunsen Nelson Families Supplemental Supplies.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as detailed?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as detailed.
Second?
Second.
Are there any questions, comments? All right, roll call. Gallagher?
Yes.
Griffith?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Polly?
Yes.
O'Sullivan?
Yes.
Callahan, yes. Motion carries. All right, citizens' comments. Are there any citizens in the audience, in person or online, who would like to make a comment on an item not on tonight's agenda and falls within the committee's purview? So I know we'll have the opportunity for the community engagement next week. Also, if you do have a comment, I'll be happy to stick around afterwards. We can chat too. All right, new business.
Okay, new business. Next meeting, we'll follow up on the community forum based on the boundary line discussions, the open house on Monday. We're targeting a vote on that date just based on the information we have, but certainly want to go through the process of the community forum to move forward. And you can expect the middle school and the secondary level school improvement plans as part of the next phase.
Okay, terrific. All right, now we will be adjourning to executive session and will not be returning to open meeting pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21(3), to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating positions of a public body and the chair so declares. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Motion to enter executive session.
Is there a second? All right, questions, comments? Nope. Gallagher?
Yes.
Griffith?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Polly?
Yes.
O'Sullivan?
Yes.
Callahan, yes.